testing neurotransmitters is a really important piece of the puzzle, and it's not typically part of routine testing. But to find out what's going on, looking at not just one or two neurotransmitters, like not just looking at, like, for example, serotonin, because most people would say, okay, let's jump to serotonin if there's low mood, but we need to actually balance all of the neurotransmitters. So that's why these panels can give us such great information about what's going on with our biochemistry.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Holistic Navigator podcast, where we believe in the body's capacity for self-healing if it's given the proper nutrients and care it deserves. My name is Brian Strickland. I'm the producer of the show, and as always, I'm joined in the studio today by our host, Ed Jones. On this week's episode, we're talking with Dr. Vanessa Pavey. Dr. Pavey is a naturopathic doctor and education scientist at Life Extension. She enjoys discussing the mechanism of how nutrition influences the body and is committed to improving health through education. And today we're talking about the world of neurotransmitters. Unbalanced brain chemistry contributes to depression, insomnia, lack of energy, and so much more. So to say it's an important part of our well-being is a bit of an understatement. Today, we're looking at how to find out if your neurotransmitters are functioning properly and what to do if they're not. And we have a packed show today. It's chock full of great information. So I'm going to hop off and introduce you to your host, Mr. Ed Jones.
Thank you very much, Brian. And again, this is Ed Jones with The Holistic Navigator. And I have a topic today that I have been searching for an organized format for quite some time, actually for at least a couple years. And it deals with brain function and neurotransmitters. And I want to help empower people who are sometimes very frustrated about the options that we seem to not realize that we have in order to balance brain chemistry. And if we know anything about health, you know, the physical body sometimes can be fairly functional, but when those brain neurotransmitters are out of balance, life becomes a great challenge. There's no doubt, from hyperactivity to fatigue, brain fog, depression, anxiety. All of this is rooted in brain chemistry. Of course, we know, and if anyone's listened to me for the past 2.5 years, we know that the brain's not a separate entity. It is very fully connected to the human body, physiology, gut function, which all contributes to the balance within the brain. So it's not just a separate piece we fix. And that's what we, of course, thrive on here at the Holistic Navigator, is the synergy between every piece of the puzzle of the human body. Well, today, and I wanted to have a true expert on this so that I could inform everyone and also learn more for myself. But today we have Dr. Vanessa Pavey. She's a naturopathic doctor and education scientist at Life Extension. And she was trained as a primary care physician and skilled in medical biochemistry. And she earned her Bachelor of Science degree in biology from the University of St. Francis before training in naturopathic medicine at Bastyr. And I love Bastyr University, and I actually so respect a naturopath because they understand about the importance of looking for the why of disorders in the body instead of just labeling and looking at the what and treating a symptom. So welcome to the Holistic Navigator, Dr. Pavey.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
And, you know, I tend to initially ramble a good bit because that's just my nature. And if you get me drinking tequila, I really ramble. So we're not on tequila this morning, so I'll do my best to not go too far. But after 42 years of helping hopefully tens of thousands of people by listening to their health challenges, and many of those can be emotional, not just physical. And I've always tried to search. I think if there's any word for me over my 4+ decades, I am a seeker of better answers, not just the standard protocol of, it's in PubMed, so this is what we do. So much of health relates to wisdom as much as knowledge. And wisdom comes from experience, and it comes from also being connected to that word wisdom. And I know I learned so much from the people that I interact with, and one of those is my daughter. About 3 years ago, or maybe a tiny bit less, she experienced some pretty significant emotional fluctuations, I guess we would use that word. And, I love experimenting with different remedies to help balance brain chemistry, working on gut function. But I wanted to get more specific help in far as instead of just guessing. And so I ordered a neurotransmitter testing from Life Extension. And I have it in front of me, actually, my daughter's neurotransmitter test. And I want to talk some about that, Dr. Pavey, because we're kind of stumbling in the dark, and it doesn't mean you can't find answers, but doing something like this test allows us to have some real concrete options as far as what are the next steps to take with lifestyle, nutrient intervention, perhaps drug intervention, changes of something you're now doing in order to find and balance the neurotransmitters. And does that sound reasonable to you?
Oh, we can certainly talk about what these neurotransmitters represent. Absolutely. And this is such a timely topic anyway, because stress as well can have a huge impact on our neurotransmitters. And recently, a lot of people are under even more stress than I would say than typical. In fact, I pulled up some statistics, like, for example, some data from the CDC. Now, their data, the most recent, is between 2015 to 2018. But about 13% of Americans over the age of 18 reported taking an antidepressant. And what's even more kind of shocking to me is that between 2015 and 2018, about a quarter of the women above the age of 60 also reported taking antidepressants. So testing neurotransmitters is a really important piece of the puzzle, and it's not typically part of routine testing. But to find out what's going on, looking at not just one or two neurotransmitters, like not just looking at, like, for example, serotonin, because most people would say, okay, let's jump to serotonin if there's low mood, but we need to actually balance all of the neurotransmitters. So that's why these panels, like, for example, the one that you have in front of you, can give us such great information about what's going on with our biochemistry.
That is exciting news, and it's actually, I've never really super delved into advising other people of this, even though I did get my daughter to do it, and I want to change that because it's like pulling in a gas station and you don't have a fuel gauge to know how low am I on something. So you really have no clue. So you just take a chance. And before we go any further, basically, what is a neurotransmitter, and list a few of those so people kind of have a real connection to what we're speaking about.
Oh, absolutely. So neurotransmitters are those little tiny chemical messengers that are not just in our brain, because oftentimes we think of neurotransmitters in our brain, but actually neurotransmitters work all throughout our body. And really, their primary role, that a lot of people are familiar with, is that they regulate, like, for example, emotions, but also cognition and even our physical responses, like, for example, muscle contraction. So, for example, they help to support our memory, our attention, movement, appetite, energy levels, which a lot of people, that's the number one complaint for primary care doctors, are people coming in saying they have not enough energy, feeling fatigued. So again, neurotransmitters should be looked at.
Absolutely. And I do a podcast, many of those. I've got 96 or something like that now. And one of them is on anxiety and depression. And I list on that one, or the other one where I think the other one was, why am I so tired all the time? And I list on there, the number one side effect of depression is fatigue. So many people physically may have their bodies are doing okay. But when you have a true level of even melancholy before full depression, fatigue is one of the first symptoms that generally can arise. So, taking nutrients for energy will help probably. So what we do is with this test, this neurotransmitter test, which is administered at home, isn't it? Explain how this test is so easy to do.
Oh, absolutely. So it's just a very simple urine collection. So we can do urine like the first void of the morning or the second void. It's your option. But what they're measuring, because of the fact it's urine, some people ask, well, how does a urine test tell us what's going on in the brain? Well, here's the thing about urine neurotransmitter testing. It's actually giving us information about whole body neurotransmitter levels, which correlate really nicely, especially in some studies, like, for example, correlating what's going on in the brain with serotonin versus whole body, like urine. So there's very good correlation between the two. However, we can't just talk about the brain. For example, in naturopathic medicine, we talk about, looking at the whole body, treating the whole person. Like for example, GABA and serotonin, and we'll talk about some of these neurotransmitters in a moment in kind of who they are and what they do. But I wanted to let you know that like GABA and serotonin are created in the digestive tract, not just the brain. There are neurotransmitter receptors for glutamate that are found throughout the body, like, for example, in the kidneys and the heart. Our adrenal glands make neurotransmitters. People are familiar with the term adrenaline. That's actually a neurotransmitter. The more medical term for adrenaline is epinephrine. And the adrenal glands also create another neurotransmitter called norepinephrine. So really, we want to know what's going on with the whole body, not just what's going on in the brain. Now, in terms of accuracy, because that's usually what most people ask, is this test accurate? Well, this particular test for urine neurotransmitter testing that Life Extension provides is using a type of technology called high-performance liquid chromatography tandem mass spectrometry, which is actually the gold standard of testing for. It's a really highly accurate methodology to measure the amount of neurotransmitters in the urine. So let's kind of discuss what these serotonins and GABAs and a little bit of detail on those. So typically how I think about neurotransmitters is I lump the neurotransmitters into two major groups. We have our excitatory neurotransmitters that kind of get the body revved up. And then we have our inhibitory neurotransmitters, which kind of calm the body down. Well, for whole body health, we actually want a balance between the two. We don't want to have an over-excitatory activity in the body and then low inhibitory. But then again, we don't want too much inhibitory either, because that could make us feel sluggish with low excitatory. So we really need to achieve a balance between these two major groups. Now, our major excitatory neurotransmitters include dopamine, adrenaline, glutamate, histamine, and a neurotransmitter called PEA, which some people aren't familiar with. PEA stands for phenylethylamine. It's one of my favorite neurotransmitters, and I'll explain why, what it does to support our system. But the major inhibitory neurotransmitters, the second group, include serotonin, GABA, and glycine. So, yeah.
Well, that's actually so interesting to me on the PEA, because I've done one podcast on PEA with another person that I respected in regard to neuropathy pain, and also the study that I know was presented through one of the Life Extension magazines on glaucoma. And it was very impressive. In fact, I sent that study to a couple of the eye eye docs here in this town. I'm excited to learn about the PEA because I'm actually taking it myself for some nerve issues, and I literally did not know it was a neurotransmitter. So thank you, Dr. Pavey, for educating me on that. And I think it's going to be a rising star as far as some options for people. And again, I want to encourage people, just because you get this test and you're showing some imbalances, there are plenty of information now to help you help yourself through the means of lifestyle, nutrition, and perhaps a drug down the road. But we always try to encourage people to do everything possible before we reach the level of the prescription, because those have significant side effects. They also can save lives at certain points, but that's really at the last stage. There's 90% of the people could be balanced without having to resort to those most of the time. Now, I know the test that I did for Katie, it was about, looks like it was maybe 3 years ago. It looks like you have really, actually 5 years ago, wow, you really updated this test, because when I'm looking at this list of the basic and the comprehensive, you have a lot of stuff that you are checking, including PEA. I'm going to order this test soon after being finished with you today, because I am so interested in this. So a person will purchase a test online at which website? Tell that now.
Oh, well, you can call into Life Extension, but you can also order online at lifeextension.com.
Okay. And so they would do that. They're going to get a kit, right? Or you tell me. I don't remember. It's been too many years when I had my daughter do it. What happens? They'll get a box in the mail or what?
They sure will, yes. So it will be something that you can collect at home at your convenience. It does come in a box that has the little vials for the first or second urine collection of the day. It also does have a ice pack. So I want to remind everyone, if you do order this test, make sure that you put the ice pack in the freezer the night before, so it's nice and frozen when you collect your urine. Also, it does come with a 2-day shipping. So after you collect the urine, it is very important to make sure that you get it in the mail right away so we can get it onto the laboratory to get your results. Also, prior to doing the collection, it does come with some instructions. So there are certain foods that may impact your neurotransmitters. So for 48 hours prior to the collection, you may want to avoid the foods on that list. And it does require fasting. So please don't eat anything before you collect your first morning or second morning void of the day, because we do want to make sure that, if you have some coffee, that can certainly impact our neurotransmitters, right? Coffee is stimulating. So we want to make sure that we're getting accurate representation of what's going on with the neurotransmitter levels without food influence.
Now, what about a person who already, like myself, I take, and in fact, on The Holistic Navigator, on the sleep issue, I feel like GABA has saved my life overall, because I'm a chronic insomniac. I do it in the middle of the night so that I can calm that cognitive popcorn that's going off in my head, and I get back to sleep. Without my GABA, I would be in that light stage, and it would be disastrous to my next day and next life, actually. So I use GABA a lot. So if I'm using that for sleep, would I need to come off of anything nutritionally for a few days?
Now, that's a good question, because I actually get these kind of detailed questions of, well, if I'm taking this, should I stop it or should I continue it prior to my test results? Well, here's what I might encourage. It really depends on what you want to see. If you want to see your test results with what you're taking, because if you're happy with your regimen, it's helping, and you want to make sure that everything is staying in balance with your GABA support, absolutely go ahead and continue taking it. But hopefully what we're going to see are some nice balanced levels of GABA. But if you don't want to, if you want to see what your baseline levels are, say, for example, you hadn't tested before starting your GABA support, and you want to see, well, what are my baseline levels? What's going on? It really just depends on kind of getting off of it and making sure that this is what your body is creating. And remember, it's not just the brain. The body can create GABA as well, like, for example, in the digestive tract, because some people want to see, well, what is my digestive tract attributing to it, especially if there's like digestive issues or concerns with like dysbiosis, which can have a huge impact on GABA as well. But as a general rule, usually discontinuing something that you've been consistently taking is usually between 6 and 8 weeks. However, GABA doesn't have a very long half-life, so it may be better to maybe just stop for a week, although that may be a rough week if you're feeling good on the GABA.
I like that. That's such good common sense. And I tend to get outspoken sometimes. It seems like there's a lacking of common sense in conversations of health in many professionals. And that's why I strive to find people like yourself, which I already knew clearly that you think outside the box and you also have common sense to help people with this information. Now, two of my podcasts I have done with Brenda Watson, she was on PBS for probably 14 years on the gut and the gut flora and what we need to do about it. And everybody knows about probiotics. The picture's much bigger than just grab a bottle and expect to get full results. So I encourage people to listen to my podcast with Brenda Watson, one of them, Long-Term Solutions for Bacterial Overgrowth in the Gut, called SIBO. That was one of my recent ones, and she was very informative. And anytime, I don't know if everybody listening has the same experience as I do. I think they do. If I get food poisoning or I had a stomach bug, I get terribly anxious, and it's not totally because I'm not feeling well. It's because it's disturbed the factory that makes a lot, as you say, a huge percentage of these brain neurotransmitters produced in the gut. Well, if the gut's really upset, of course it's going to upset the cart all the way down the pathways to the brain. And then the brain's making me feel anxious. It's making me feel depressed. And until I get well from my gut. So do I treat the brain? Well, not really. I treat the gut. That's the way to get better quickly. Again, education is the key. And I say this, I've said it many times on my Holistic Navigator. I separate the world into two classes of people, those that are learners and those that are non-learners. The non-learners are pretty much doomed, because if you go to a doc in the box and you just get regular treatments, you will only be treated with pharmaceuticals that are generally treating symptoms only. I want to fix the body. I know you want to fix the body, because that's the only solution for the long haul. And I do want to make one quick statement about, because I'm on this rant right now, my anti-MSG rant, monosodium glutamate in foods. And it seems that more and more restaurants are adding it to their sauces and their gravies and their this. Part of it's lack of information. The other part, it's an addictive kind of chemical, because it's an excitatory chemical. As you explained, glutamate is a neurotransmitter. Well, MSG, what does MSG do to the glutamate levels? Because it makes my pulse go up significantly, very, very fast, and I feel awful for hours. So how is that working in my brain?
Oh, absolutely. Great point. Because MSG stands for monosodium glutamate. So it does have this incredibly excitatory activity in the body. In fact, I like to think about our two major neurotransmitters. Most people would say, if I ask that question, they would say, oh, well, probably dopamine and serotonin, because those are usually the ones that are talked about the most. However, no, the two major neurotransmitters are glutamate and GABA. Glutamate is our major excitatory neurotransmitter. GABA is our major calming neurotransmitter, which is oftentimes the go-to one to help to support sleep, although there are other pathways as well, like, for example, glycine, even though it's an amino acid, does have a neurotransmitter effect by helping to calm the system down. So that can be another great one to add to help to support, a more calm, restful sleep. But also serotonin. Serotonin in of itself is a little bit more calming, even though it does contribute to our happiness and well-being. But serotonin is the precursor to making melatonin, our sleep hormone. So supporting those kind of inhibitory, calming neurotransmitters all together are very helpful, which is why the testing is great to do, so we can see which levels are high, which ones are low. But on the MSG side of things, glutamate is incredibly stimulating, and most of us are not low on glutamate. Now, those who are low on glutamate, for some reason, like for example, if they're not bringing in or making enough glutamine, the amino acid precursor to making glutamate. For example, if you're very protein deficient, there is a potential glutamate might be a little low, and that can actually create kind of like foggy thinking, because we do need glutamate for memory and thinking and kind of that excitatory function. But most people don't have that problem. Most of us are getting plenty of protein, plenty of glutamine, and making lots of wonderful glutamate. So adding extra glutamate from the diet can actually create an overstimulation and lead to excitotoxicity, which can actually be damaging to our brain cells. Yeah,
that's great explanation, and that can damage to a point of actually a disease. And my number one question is, and I don't have the knowledge to know this, and I don't absolutely expect you to. You may. Are these athletes and myself who are taking glutamine in our protein drinks, are we subjecting ourselves to a little risk of too much glutamate, or is there a feedback loop that's actually going to manage that so that we don't have to worry about it? Glutamine being a natural amino acid and is found in all proteins, and we need it, I know, as a total thing. And also, secondarily, the people who have leaky gut and many of the intestinal healing products utilize glutamine because 5 grams of it can be extremely healing to the inner lining of the gut in very quick order, actually. The gut needs glutamine. Where should I advise people that are concerned about the glutamate level? Where am I with that?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. Because now glutamine itself, the amino acid, is actually, it's not essential. It's so important our body can actually make it from other amino acids. However, it is the most abundant amino acid in circulation. So we need it not just for our muscles, because that was a great point. I mean, our muscles contain a lot of glutamine. So we do actually need to make sure we have plenty of glutamine for our muscles, our digestive tract, like you mentioned, but also people don't know, or typically don't know, that glutamine is the major fuel source for our immune cells. So we actually need glutamine to help to support our immune cell function. So a very, very important amino acid. Now, because of the fact it is the amino acid precursor to making glutamate, some people get concerned about, am I overdoing glutamate, contributing to excitotoxicity? However, glutamate actually is the precursor to making GABA. So how it works is when you bring in glutamine, it will convert into glutamate, and it does so by an enzyme that we have in our body called glutamine synthase. However, glutamate doesn't just always stay as glutamate. It can turn into GABA, but here's the thing. It needs help from vitamin B6 in the active form called pyridoxal 5-phosphate. If we're lacking pyridoxal 5-phosphate in our system, we could potentially have a backup of a little bit too much excess glutamate.
So the deficiency of B6 in that coenzymated form would tend to prevent that, right?
Maybe not necessarily prevent, but it sure does help support that pathway. So it's typically bringing in glutamine is very unlikely going to attribute to excessive glutamate in a healthy individual. But we want to make sure that we are providing the body those important B vitamin precursors. In fact, the neurotransmitters rely on many of these important B vitamins. Like, for example, not just the active form of vitamin B6, but also vitamin B2, which is riboflavin, the niacins, the B3, like niacinamide and niacin itself. Also, the active form of B 9, the folate active form, which is methyl tetrahydrofolate, another very, very important B vitamin for creating neurotransmitters.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because we're getting near the end here. And I want people, again, to understand that the devil is in the details, and I've learned that so well over 40 years. You just don't go out and buy your normal drugstore brand B complex and expect to get the, well, like you use the word, the active form, the most efficient form, the coenzymated form. Many formulas I see are the same that I found in 1970 when I was shopping in stores. No, the science is very clear on the fact that this coenzymated is the choice to make. So anyone listening, understand you need to find the right people, the right businesses to support that going to know and vet the products. I mean, the Holistic Navigator is moderately sponsored by NutritionW.com. And at NutritionW.com, all of that work has been done. Nothing is available that hasn't met the standards of science and wisdom. So please, I encourage you, if you can't find a reliable local source of experts, go to NutritionW.com to purchase these products. I just love this information, Dr. Pavey. It's so valuable. It's going to be so helpful to many people that myself and many of our practitioners and our staff speak to people about. And tell us approximately, I know time will change things, approximately the cost and the fact that you have 2 tests. You have one that is the basic and one that is a comprehensive. Do you recall about how much those are?
I do. So our comprehensive neurotransmitter urine test typically runs $295. But every year, Life Extension puts on a big sale. And now these prices can change from year to year, but our current sale price is $221.25 for the comprehensive. And I'll give a quick explanation of the difference between the comprehensive and basic. But our basic typically runs $199, and it's currently on sale for $149.25. Now, what is the difference between the two is that the basic test is running those important neurotransmitters. We've got the serotonin and dopamine, GABA and glutamate, epinephrine and norepinephrine, glycine, histamine, and PEA. So a great variety of neurotransmitters to see what's going on, which ones are high, which ones are low, which ones are in balance. But our comprehensive goes a little bit further because it's actually looking at some of the breakdown products of these neurotransmitters. Because sometimes if one is high or one is low, we don't necessarily know, is it because we're not making enough, or is it because our body's breaking them down too quickly? So the comprehensive one, that one's going to give us some indication of whether it's a production issue or we're breaking down the neurotransmitters down too quickly. So these would include metabolites, like for example, tyramine and tryptamine, which are trace amines that are breakdown products of some of the amino acids that are used to creating these neurotransmitters. We can get some information on some other, like for example, dopamine breakdown products like Dopac and 3-MT, and some breakdown products of like our epinephrine and norepinephrine and serotonin. So it gives us a lot more detail.
Wow, that is such a worthy investment because at least every other person that I speak to, and you may find it true also, if they could flip a switch of any switch within their own human body, the one that makes a sense of well-being would be the switch that I would want more than almost anything else. Probably energy would be second, but that sense of well-being, I don't care how energetic I am, if I'm flipping between a little anxiety and melancholy and hyperactivity and hypoactivity in the brain, it's a pretty challenging way to live a life. I'm almost 64, and I've had many years of trying to manage. That's what I actually know that has to be done within myself. Is managing. You're not going to go in as super fix, but we all need a toolbox. We need access to options that are, 1, not toxic, 2, effective, and getting this information is so valuable. In fact, I'm just about to complete a class with Dr. Amen. Dr. Amen's written 18 books. I think he had 9 of them on the New York Times bestseller on brain health. And he does a SPECT analysis, which is more of a scan of the brain. And actually it's very interesting. And once I get this certification, I will be a certified Dr. Amen brain coach. And he's very much into the same exact recommendations as you and I are speaking about the nutrient supports and the gut supports that balances these brain chemistries. So the world is changing for the positive, and I'm very excited. I remember really not that long ago, maybe 10 years ago, vitamin D test could easily have been $150. Well, now you're getting a test that's telling all of your brain chemistry for almost the same amount. So we are evolving into a much more efficient and empowering system. Does require the person to take steps. And we have to get out of this mindset that insurance, the government, other people should be paying. No, they're going to pay for emergencies. They're going to pay for the things you run to the hospital for. They're not going to take care of you preventatively. It is on us to do that for the ones we love and our own physical, mental body. So, and I know I'm going to say exactly the same thing that you believe in. Many of the things that balance brain chemistry really involves sleep, adequate protein, gut health, finding pleasure in life. Just having pleasure helps to balance it by lowering and upping the kind of different imbalances. Meditating every single day. Meditating doesn't mean you're trying to escape from your world. You're finding peace within the battle of your world. Sunlight. And then, of course, my king is exercise. I exercise every single morning. I get up at about 4:15 at the latest. I'm at the gym every Monday through Friday. I don't ever waver, and I'm overly disciplined, and I don't expect other people to do that. But exercise is such an important way to balance these brain chemicals, and I know you would agree to all that, wouldn't you, Dr. Pavey?
Oh, I agree. The balancing of the brain chemicals is a really important piece of our overall health. Absolutely.
Well, I have found this, and I know our listeners will find it extremely not only informative, but some will find it actually life-saving. And I appreciate all of that information. And I know I always have this feel that you and I will be having another podcast in the upcoming months because I've got already several topics I would like to delve into with you. And if that's good with you, we will stay in contact.
Oh, fantastic. I look forward to it.
All right, Dr. Pavey. And thank everyone listening again for empowering yourself. And I'm here as long as there's breath coming out of my lungs. I will be doing this podcast. And, the more I learn, the more I want to learn. And we are, as a society, I think COVID has been a blessing because it has opened the eyes and the doors of so many individuals and health professionals to know that we have more options than what that little toolbox of traditional teachings has kind of supported. And, the pill for an ill system, which is the traditional system, is coming to the forefront that it's not really the most efficient and somewhat of a broken system in many cases. And that's what we are encompassing here at The Holistic Navigator. All of you have a safe and fearless day. Until next time, this is Ed Jones with The Holistic Navigator.
The information on this podcast and the topics discussed have not been evaluated by the FDA or anyone of the medical profession, and is not aimed to replace any advice you may receive from your medical practitioner. The Holistic Navigator assumes no responsibility or liability whatsoever on behalf of any purchaser or listener of these materials. The Holistic Navigator is not a doctor, nor does he claim to be. Please consult your physician before beginning any health regimen.